Good evening. I am so very pleased to be with you this evening, and with all sincerity, I am extremely humbled to be among you. Some time ago, I underwent a life-changing experience, one that reshaped my understanding of the world. Involuntarily, I was joined to that long litany of women, men, and children from more than 150 countries who fell victim to the cruel act of torture. However, unlike many of my fellow tortured, I managed to survive. But that experience etched into my being a mistrust of all humanity and the very death of God. And for a time, I was simply a body without a soul, a body occupying space and walking an aimless path to nowhere. That was my life. It was only years later, or after putting God on trial, that I finally came to my senses. And I realized that I could not hold God responsible for the actions committed by men and women, no matter how evil they might be. And it was that realization that moved me from the sidelines of silence into a ministry of speaking truth to those in power. And I assure you, it has not been an easy journey. But that horrible experience has led directly to the hopeful message I hope I bring here this evening. One of the things that I've been asked to do is to share the name of someone who has been a prophetic witness in my life. Proof of God's hand in the sowing seeds of justice in the seeming barren ground of cruelty and war. I could set a banquet table of the names of those who have served that purpose for me, those who have pointed me toward God, the God of hope, justice, peace, and allow me to emphasize of action as well. However, tonight, I do not wish to paint the canvas with features of those of the past, but rather with those who stand on the threshold of leadership, prepared, whether they know it or not, to be our guides into the future. Where will we find them? One of the messages of the civil rights movement was that the leaders were already among the people, whether they were preachers, mechanics, college students, or plantation workers. They were there and they were ready to lead. That was true 50 years ago, and I am convinced that it is just as true today. Leaders are among us. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about every person in this room. I'm talking about the person sitting beside you. person sitting in front and behind you. I'm talking about the person standing in your very own shoes. That's right, I'm talking about each of you. I also want to warn you that this is not some commencement speech where hollow words about the graduates as future leaders are thrown hither and yon. The leadership that I am talking about costs, and sometimes the cost is very great indeed. In the struggle for justice, I believe there is no leadership without such cost. And only those who are willing to pay it will in fact be leaders. I'm thinking at this moment not just of well-known, the Romeros of the world, but of Jonathan Daniels, a young seminarian in Alabama. He faced an enraged white man with a shotgun. Daniels pushed the African-American children away from him and took the full force of the shotgun blast himself, dying in front of the county store. And when I think of that young man, my own thoughts turn to the church, our church, and what is required of her, what is required of us. And to ask a question as serious as anyone can ask, are we honestly our sisters and brothers' keeper? Will we truly stand with them in the face of injustice, in the face of brutality? Will we take their pain, their sorrow, and their despair and make it our own? Before you answer, ask yourself this. When you see injustice, do you stand against it with all the strength God gives you? Or do you turn and walk away? When you've answered this, ask yourself whether your church stands without exception against injustice, or whether it finds reason to stand aside. And then there are universities. Consider this one, for example. First, let me say, I have nothing against Georgetown University. It's a fine school. But is it an unequivocal voice for justice? Or does it prefer to seek well-known names regardless of their past actions? If you wish an example, consider former Colombian President Álvaro Uribe. The press release the university issued proclaimed him a distinguished world leader and welcomed him warmly to the university community. Help me understand, how can one who so many have called a human rights violator be so welcomed by a Jesuit university? One that espouses humane values, truth, and justice. And what about our government? Its actions range from providing the American leader of the Guatemalan death squads that tortured me, to the Bush administration's definition of torture and practicing it as legal, despite a worldwide understanding that their actions made them war criminals. I imagine that some in the audience are not pleased to hear these words, but I will accept the cost of their dissatisfaction to speak what I consider the truth. If we do not demand the very best of our church, our universities, and our government, then we have already abandoned a sincere search for justice.